very precarious position in this country. We need a political change, but we also need the resolve to resist. Hey, thanks for watching our live stream. I'm the host, David Krayden. I'll be back in about 10 minutes with the show. In the meantime, have a look at some of these clips and take the opportunity, please, to like this broadcast, ring the bell, or subscribe.
And we're stepping up in every way we can because we know that Russia must win this war. That Ukraine must win this war against Russia.
Go down the list of things that Justin Trudeau disapproves of, and you can imagine all of the things that will be criminalized. That someone who spent the first half of his adult life as a practicing racist, who dressed up in hideous racist costumes so many times he says he can't remember them all, should then be the arbiter on what constitutes hate.
I did not call people who were unvaccinated names.
The Prime Minister lied and his minions continue to lie about you for everything you did. Thank you to put your life on the line for us. You're one of the greatest women I ever met in my life.
A lot of people would say that you're simply taking a page out of the Donald Trump book.
Like which people would say that?
Well, I'm sure a great many Canadians, but...
Like who?
I don't know who, but...
We feel, because you all will have implants, and we measure your brain waves, and I can immediately tell you how the people react, or I can feel how the people react to your answers.
Oh, no, Mr. Bond. I expect you to be chipped.
Welcome to another episode of Stand on Guard.
This
I'm your
is
host,
an
David
Manchurian
Krayden,
candidate. For people who don't understand the expression, and I'm not talking about the movie, I'm referring to somebody who can be used as a useful idiot by another country to come out and spout these things off. He is a Marxist.
End your silence. Speak up. For God's sake, stop complying. Start rebelling. They're out to get you if you do not resist.
Good buddy, mercy sakes alive, looks like we got us a convoy.
Canadian country singer Paul Brandt here. I've been listening with my wife and 2 kids, and we want to say thank you for all you're doing in defense of civil liberties and freedom.
I'll ask the question I posed to you at the start of my round. Will you apologize on behalf of the government for this outrageous invite?
And
stand by the invitation.
Of course, what I said in my initial.
You have no shame.
What? Oh my heavens!
There is nothing they fear like the crystal clear sound of someone somewhere telling the truth.
So it will be a world integrating the physical, biological, and the digital dimensions. So it will be a new world.
Stop giving them the benefit of the doubt. Because I can tell you, you cannot comply your way out of a tyranny.
Out of war, a few people make huge fortunes. I would say it's plain to see that the racket has been going from strength to strength ever since. In his farewell address to the American people in 1961, outgoing President and old soldier Dwight D. Eisenhower warned about the threat posed by what he was already able to identify as the military-industrial complex.
These are all small countries today. They're much like the Greek city-states in the age of the Roman Empire. We're a sort of declining Rome at this point. I hope Americans will figure that out and act against it, but we're a declining Rome. The European states are like the little Greek city-states that were entirely dependent upon Roman military power to save them from the Macedonians. This whole business is a sham. NATO is probably not going to survive.
From the Public Health Agency of Canada did not have the science to support this policy. So the government initiated a study with a guy named David Fisman at the University of Toronto. And this study was so bad, Madam Speaker, that there's a book called Fisman's Fraud, The Rise of Canadian Hate Science, and I just want to know how much money did they spend on these studies to support this Arrive scam when they knew that they didn't have the science to even support it from day one?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Well, Madam Speaker, the mega conservative far right is coming out. These are the anti, these are the ones that still deny the pandemic. And at the end of the day, thank goodness it was that Canadians and the majority of the people in the House saw the value of protecting the health and well-being of Canadians, and that the far right was marginalized back then, Madam Speaker, because as a direct result, more people are living today.
When did you and your government start to become so afraid of your own citizens?
The Online Harms Act. You heard about it? Well, I've got some bad news for you. It is aimed at your free speech.
Thank God for truckers.
They are so terrified that we, the people, may make what they think is the wrong choice. That in the name of protecting democracy and saving us from ourselves, they're actually destroying our democracy and taking away our freedom.
This is the worst assault on freedom of expression ever in Canadian history.
Donc le but, c'était de faire une pression économique, empêcher de faire.
So the goal was to put economic pressure on these people to stop them from buying groceries, paying into their health insurance, and get them out of the streets.
Not the characterization that I would put on it. The objective was to ensure that those who were funding the continued illegal blockade of this and other cities were no longer able to do so.
Okay. Donc, vous n'avez pas répondu à ma question.
So you didn't answer my first question. In which other democratic country is it possible to do that?
Democratically passed legislation in this country pursuant to the Emergencies Act in Canada.
Okay, donc vous avez fait le droit là. Vous vous êtes inspiré de la Corée du Nord.
So what, were you inspired by North Korea for this?
No. I'm not going to respond to that type of question, Madam Chair.
No, mais
He's calling them domestic terrorists and wants to freeze their bank accounts. This has been absolutely outrageous. And everybody now is starting to agree that Justin Trudeau has lost this fight.
There will be consequences.
Justin Trudeau, though, this week said something I hated, which he called out. He said, the world we're starting to see the rise, the growth of authoritarianism and totalitarianism and dictatorships. And I couldn't believe that he said this with a straight face. Listen.
In all of our democracies, in every democracy around the world, we are seeing a rising movements of either authoritarian populism or skepticism about democracy itself. And we all need to recommit ourselves to standing up, not just for Ukraine, but through standing up for Ukraine, to the very principles that make our countries strong and free.
So Justin Trudeau says these comments, he says them with a straight face, as if he doesn't realize what's happening in his own country being led by him to clamp down on freedoms, the authoritarianism that he is presiding over in Canada.
Biden mourned Navalny's death. Even in prison, he was a powerful voice for the truth, he said. An interesting statement while journalist Julian Assange, who published Truth Inconvenient to the US and the West, presently rots in Belmarsh prison as he fights extradition to the US. I'm not yet aware of Biden mentioning, far less lamenting, the death in a Ukrainian prison of US citizen and writer Gonzalo Lira, who was critical of the Zelensky regime. Biden's administration has sought determinedly to jail his and their strongest and most popular opponent, Donald Trump. And yet, in the immediate aftermath of Navalny's death, Biden highlighted Vladimir Putin's desperate attempts to stamp out the opposition. Zelensky, propped up only by Western cash, has crushed his own political opponents as well. The pattern seems clear. Bleat about enemies threatening democracy, while simultaneously and blatantly and hypocritically seeking to trample on democracy at home, or turn a blind eye to the same being carried out by allies, or make that business partners.
Welcome back to another Stand on Guard. This is live from Question Period. Question Period's not even begun yet. We haven't even got the statements by members up. But a few things to talk about. You just saw Neil Oliver on my show. I will be on Neil's show this week on Wednesday on his podcast. I know a lot of you who watch my show also watch Neil's podcast, his broadcast, as well as his GBN report every week. I'm looking forward. I've never been on his podcast. Neil is a great guy. And it's a funny thing is because his wife told him, you got to watch this guy, David Krayden, sometime. He talks just like you. So he started watching my show. And his office contacted me one time to talk about one of the issues I was covering. It was the Million Person March, now that I recall. And he asked if I would be on the show to talk about the Million Person March. And that began a long distance friendship, and we've been corresponding ever since. And he's been on my show several times now. But this is my first time I'll be on his broadcast. I'm looking forward to that.
We have recently switched to drinking water bottles out of water out of when we have water bottles out of a plastic, away from plastic towards paper, like drink box water bottles sort of things. Anyone who wants to be Prime Minister of this country needs to be clear with Canadians about whose votes he wants and who he stands with. If Pierre Poilievre wanted to be a responsible leader, I'll even give him the words. This is what he should say. I reject categorically the endorsement and the support of Diagolon and of Alex Jones. Because Diagolon is a violent white nationalist organization.
Through the hard work of our unions that got this to fruition when Brian Mulroney passed the act in 1990. Now, progress has been made towards workers' safety. We know this. It's happened because politicians have passed bills and changed regulations. But that happened because of the activism of...
Alex Jones is a garbage conspiracy theorist. That's all Pierre Poilievre would have to say. But he won't say it. And that tells you about the kinds of choices he's making as a leader.
So just to be clear, no one's willing to answer the question specifically. How many jobs are being created and what is the cost for the government deal?
If you're not going to listen to the answer of it saying 1,000 jobs created, then there's nothing we can do for you.
There is no price you can put on that because we're investing into the people. The money is staying here in Ontario. It's not going overseas. It's not going down to the U.S. It's staying right here in Ontario for decades and generations to come.
He shares his older brother endured the unrelenting, cruel degeneration from Parkinson's for about 5 years, until almost every aspect of his life was greatly
sound back
diminished,
here.
with zero hope of abatement or cure. Last year, his
Thank
older
God we
brother
didn't
started
miss
to look
any of the
forward to
question
departing
period.
on
So
his
anyway,
own terms
sound
in
is.
his own home with the loving
We're having some
support of
internet
his wife
problems
and
here.
family.
I don't
He told his
doubt if
younger
it's
brother
YouTube.
to organize a farewell
Anyway,
party
thanks
the
for your
morning of
patience.
his departure. He wanted no tears or unhappiness, just family members celebrating the excellent years he enjoyed so much. And he wanted to participate in his own celebration of life. April is Parkinson's Awareness Month. Life with Parkinson's is going to look different for everyone, and it's changing over time. To all those affected by PD, including people living with the disease, their care partners, medical teams, and others, we are here fighting alongside you for better supports and services. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Chatham-Kent Leamington.
Mr. Speaker, this past week I attended the Canadian Produce Marketing Association annual meeting and trade show in Vancouver. The fruit and vegetable industry gathered to engage in effective ways they can continue to feed the nation and supply Canadians with healthy, nutritious food for their families. I was proud to see the number and both the quality and quantity of exhibitors from Chatham-Kent Leamington front and center at the show. But I also heard about the severe challenges the industry is facing, how the Prime Minister's carbon tax is resulting in higher food costs, the profound ramifications of the Liberal plastics ban, how it will decrease both our access to fresh produce and will increase the cost and the amount of food waste. Every person I spoke to was adamant that Canadians want an election, a new government. Hear, hear. Mr. Speaker, when will the Prime Minister step down, axe the tax, scrap the plastics ban, and allow Conservatives to restore common sense to this country? Hear,
hear. The honourable member from Bay of Quinte.
Mr. Speaker, for $15 billion taxpayer dollars, you would think Canada would get supply chains for batteries, some vehicles, maybe even some jobs, but not in Windsor at Stellantis, where we are assembling batteries. The battery material comes from China, the cars are manufactured in Alabama, and the jobs come from overseas. Of the 2,500 jobs promised in Stellantis, more than 900 have been reported to be foreign jobs. And now the union, CBRU to Stellantis, is still hiring foreign workers for jobs promised to Canadians. Stellantis are even asking their Canadian suppliers to sponsor foreign workers and refugees perform the work when there are more than 180 Canadian iron workers and millwrights sitting at home unemployed. Canadians deserve a government that will stand up for Canadian workers. Only common sense Conservatives will ensure Canadian tax dollars are used wisely, that any taxpayer-funded job is given to Canadians, not foreign replacement workers. Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister must release all EV battery contracts. It's time to show taxpayers how much we are paying for foreign replacement jobs.
The honourable member for Avalon.
Speaker, I rise today to recognise a constituent in my riding who has single-handedly done more for his community than any person that I know. Heber Best of Calagru's Conception Bay South has been a volunteer for more than half a century, volunteering with organisations such as the Red Cross, CNIB and local Lions Club, a group he was instrumental in introducing to our town 53 years ago. Whoa. He successfully secured funding for a local skating rink, indoor swimming pool, upgrades to the local soccer field, and construction of affordable housing units for seniors, as well as the introduction of an annual youth public speaking contest. Over the years, Mr. Best has been presented with several awards, including the Newfoundland Labrador Volunteer Medal, the Lion of the Year, the Judge Brian Stevenson Fellowship Award, and the Melvin Jones Fellow Award. His contribution to our community and our province should stand as a symbol of what selflessness is, and we should all aspire to model our own lives by his example. I invite all members to join me in applauding Mr. Best for his outstanding generosity and caring spirit.
Hear, hear. The honourable member from New Westminster, Burnaby.
This week is World Immunization Week. Vaccines are crucial tools in safeguarding communities worldwide, preventing up to 5 million deaths every year from diseases such as tetanus and influenza. Vaccination campaigns have allowed us to eradicate smallpox, defeat polio, and decrease child death by over 50%. Yet challenges remain. Declining vaccination rates have brought back deadly diseases, resulting in ongoing outbreaks. Globally, 1 in 5 children are under-vaccinated or not vaccinated at all, jeopardizing their lives and futures. This week, we shout out to organizations such as the World Health Organization and others, which play a vital role in making vaccinations accessible for regions all over the globe. Strengthening healthcare systems and empowering local communities are essential steps. So is pushing back against vaccine misinformation. Let's promote vaccine production and distribution. In this World Immunization Week, let's ensure that we reach every child with life-saving vaccines.
L'honorable député de Montarville.
The honourable member for Montarville. Mr. Speaker, it's with a heavy heart that I pay my last respects to Mr. Donald Scott, better known as Mr. Bonbon, a true legend in Saint.
The book I was referring to at the end, which apparently nobody heard, it's a great book called When I Was a Kid, This Was a Free Country by G. Gordon Liddy. Yes, of infamous for his association with Richard Nixon and Watergate. But he had some really great points to make in this book. And if you forget the freedoms we used to have in this country, the freedoms we used to take for granted, have a look at this book. And there's others like it. Because sometimes we forget the things we used to be able to do without getting a certificate from the local government, without having to get permission to do everything, without being harassed by 3 levels of government for wanting to do something. We used to have the right to think as we pleased, to speak as we pleased, and to assemble as we pleased. We're losing all those freedoms. And this is why I'm fighting the Online Harms Act as vigorously as I am, because if we don't defeat this thing, it is going to swallow us up. It's going to subsume democratic action. It's going to subsume free speech in this country, and we've got to keep fighting it. So once again, the member statements are going longer than I anticipated, but thanks for your patience, folks. And my apologies for the sound. I have no idea why the sound cut out. But this is all part of YouTube's strategy of suppressing numbers. And if you missed it, I don't know if you heard it or not, but I want to thank you again, all of those people who subscribed or resubscribed over the last 48 hours. We have gone beyond our current goal, and we're sticking it to those people who say, you know, you can't maintain a station that's about policy and it doesn't just put out clickbait every day.
There's been tragic data today, Mr. Speaker. 25% of Quebecers are living below the poverty line, that is, below a good average life. And this is a direct result of the centralizing, bureaucratic, unnecessary spending of this Prime Minister. And his spending is 100% supported by the Bloc Québécois. Mr. Speaker, when will the Prime Minister and the Bloc Québécois stop impoverishing Quebecers? The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance. Mr. Speaker, 2 weeks ago, we unveiled our budget. Our budget seeks to ensure fairness for all generations and for all Quebecers. Currently, a carpenter and a nurse pay taxes at a marginal tax rate that is higher than that paid by big business. That's not fair. Yet the Conservative leader opposes our plan for fairness. The only thing these Conservatives want is austerity. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition. After 9 years, this Prime Minister is not worth the cost. He's not worth the cost for Quebecers. Quebecers are paying double for rent, for housing, and to service the national debt. This Prime Minister is a big spender. He is spending $54.1 billion on debt services charges instead of on health. What's worse, the Bloc Québécois voted in favor of this Prime Minister's spending. They support $500 billion in spending. Once again, when will this Prime Minister stop making Quebecers poorer? The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister, Minister of Finance. Mr. Speaker, here's the reality. What we just heard is untrue. Here's the truth. Canada has a AAA credit rating. Canada has the lowest debt and the lowest deficit of all G7 countries. The Conservatives are against our plan because the only thing they're in favor of is austerity, and they also support their very wealthy friends.
Leader of the Opposition.
After 9 years, this Prime Minister is not worth the drugs, disorder, death, and destruction. In May of 2022, he granted the BC NDP government's request for a criminal code exemption to allow crack, meth, heroin, and fentanyl use in parks, coffee shops, hospitals, beaches. Overdose deaths since exploded to a record-smashing 2,500 lost lives. The BC NDP government has reversed course and asked the federal government to recriminalize some hard drugs. Why won't this Prime Minister recriminalize these deaths?
The Honourable Minister for Mental Health and Addictions.
Good question.
Mr. Speaker, on this side of the House, we answered the call of the BC government when they requested the exemption on decriminalization of personal possession of certain illicit drugs. Mr. Speaker, what is driving this overdose crisis is the illegal drug supply. Every life lost is a tragedy. I met with Minister Whiteside this past Friday. We are reviewing their exemption request. Mr. Speaker, we have a clear lens on public health and public safety because we have a plan. They do not.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
She's wasting time while people are dying. In the year after this radical Prime Minister granted the decriminalization of crack, heroin, and other hard drugs in parks and hospitals, 2,500 people died. The overdose death in the 9 years of this Prime Minister have tripled to the fastest rising of the 11 countries studied by the Commonwealth Fund. Nurses are afraid to go to work because they have to put up with addicts using meth, crack, and weapons in their hospital room. Even nurses are having to give up on breastfeeding because they're worried their kids will be contaminated with the drugs they breathed in. What the hell are they thinking over there? Yeah.
Good. Nail these people to the ground on this issue.
Just withdraw the offensive word because it is not parliamentary.
Shut up.
I withdraw because they're not thinking over there.
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, last week we saw the Leader of the Opposition once again encourage supporters of white supremacy, anarchy, and misogyny.
What BS.
It's been a regular occurrence. It draws the admiration of people who dismiss the slaughter of children in our schools. The Leader of the Opposition.
What is this moron talking about? What a complete moron. The Liberals are killing people with drugs, and he wants to talk about mythical Diagolon. This guy is just so completely insane. Oh. I can't believe this. I just can't believe the depths of depravity in this government.
to invite the government House Leader to start from the top and to choose his words very carefully so that they do not cause disorder in the House.
Mr. Speaker, last week we saw the Leader of the Opposition once again visit with supporters of white supremacy, anarchy,
Who?
and misogyny.
What?
This has been a regular occurrence. He draws the admiration of people who dismiss the slaughter of children in schools.
Oh, get off
The Leader
it.
of the Opposition now has 30 seconds to speak to this House and to Canadians once I sit down. I ask him to clearly disavow the views of these dangerous people. Will he do that?
What an idiot. What a fat swine. That's the audacity. Has the audacity to suggest Poilievre is supporting white supremacy. Well, these guys support drug dealers. These liberals are just beyond the
The
pale.
Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
I unequivocally disavow the guy who spent the first half of his adult life as a practicing racist, dressing up in blackface.
Good for you. Good for you. The hypocrisy from these goddamn liberals.
The support of Hamas, and now he's brought on the extremist and radical position of allowing legal drug use in playgrounds, in hospitals, in coffee shops that has led to the mass death of our people. Will he not refuse the demand of Toronto to replicate the decriminalization nightmare?
This is good. This is the best we've seen from Question Period in weeks, even though Trudeau's not even there. This fat-ass House Leader, though, is filling in for him just fine.
Mr. Speaker, I'm sad to say the Leader of the Conservatives, the Opposition, has shown us his true colors. He speaks without conviction and clarity on a question that should be very, very, very simple for him to address. His silence speaks volumes. This is not leadership, Mr. Speaker. This is political cowardice.
You fat hypocrite. This is a farce. This is a sham. Well, of course it is. And you're all going to tell me, of course it's a sham. It's a farce. I know. Once in a while, it still upsets me to see the hypocrisy of these people.
The Honourable Member for La Prairie. When the Prime Minister unveiled his budget, or
what have
rather
we done
his
for
plan
Quebec
to
lately?
invade
That's
Quebec's
all
areas of
the Bloc wants to
jurisdiction,
know.
he justified it by saying, citizens don't care which level of government is responsible for what. Well, a Léger poll found that 82% of Quebecers think that the federal government should respect the division of powers. This is more proof that the Prime Minister is completely out of touch with reality. Quebecers are clear that what they want is for the federal government to work with other governments. Instead of playing politics, why doesn't the Prime Minister give Quebecers...
You believe there's anybody in that Liberal cabinet who would have the gall to stand up and accuse the Conservatives of white supremacy when their leader did blackface as Pierre Poilievre for half of his adult life? I mean, it's a joke. It's a sham. It's a scam. These people think they can get away with it. It's just outrageous.
In dental care, the Conservatives and the Bloc complain and will vote against it. Mr. Speaker, the bottom line is that these two parties will find different excuses to vote against this one budget. And if we were to listen to them, to either of them, then at the end of the day, Quebec would end up with nothing. The Honourable Member for La Prairie. Quebecers are not the only ones who are against interference. All the provincial and territorial premiers have added their signatures to those of the Premier of Quebec in a letter calling on Ottawa to respect our areas of jurisdiction, such as health, education, and housing. They are all calling for the right to opt out with full financial compensation from any federal intrusion outside its areas of jurisdiction. Everyone is opposed to federal interference from coast to coast to coast. When you think, as the Prime Minister does, that everyone else is wrong, maybe it's because you're the one who is looking for a fight. What does the Prime Minister have to say about that?
No, the Prime Minister ain't here
Minister of
today, as usual.
Transportation. Well, Mr. Speaker,
time for another haircut,
seeking
Pablo.
to pick a fight. Well,
You're
the
due
Bloc
at least
Québécois
twice a
are
year.
the true experts. In fact, they have a PhD in picking fights, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the Bloc is voting against our budget. They say it's important to help seniors, but they're voting against the budget. The Bloc says that we need to help Canadians, but they vote against the budget. They're complaining. They keep complaining, but they don't actually do anything.
You know, if we can get the NDP to vote against this budget, it's all over for Trudeau and the boys and girls in the front bench.
From Burnaby South.
This government stood by while food
hypocrite,
prices
Doug
and rent
mate.
skyrocketed. This hurts people living with disabilities disproportionately. After making folks wait more than 3 years, they announced a disability benefit that's too little, doesn't cover enough people, and is going to be clawed back by provinces. People struggling to put food on their table have been given crumbs by this government. When will the Prime Minister get serious about helping people?
All the money
living
this
with
guy
disabilities?
has in the bank, all he makes.
The Honourable
He has, what,
Deputy
one
Prime
suit
Minister
in his
Mr.
wardrobe,
Spence.
and it doesn't even fit him.
Speaker,
Not to mention,
we are
this woman's
glad
clothes don't fit
to
either.
be the first government, the first federal
What
government.
the hell is happening with her
in
hair? Somebody
Canadian
else mentioned that
history
today.
to put forward the financing for support for people with disabilities across
nasty
our
hair.
country. That is a milestone. It is a very big deal. Mr. Speaker, this is just the first step. We recognize there is more to do, including working carefully with provinces and territories, and we're going to do it.
Yeah, you're going to do it. Going to lose next election.
Burnaby South.
This Liberal government is failing people living with disabilities. Les groupes luttons.
Advocates for those living with disabilities are clear. The announcement of the disability benefit is just not enough. It's not working.
I hope he's lost control of his
$200,
caucus.
That's not enough. The Prime Minister has thousands, billions even to give to big oil, but pennies for Canadians living with disabilities. Will he sit down with disability advocate groups and fix this problem? The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance. Mr. Speaker, our government is proud. We are proud to be the first federal government to come forward with a disability benefit for those living with disabilities. This is a major step forward, and we are proud of our accomplishment.
Looks like somebody dragged her into the House of Commons
today. We need to work closely with provinces and territories. This is just the beginning. We need to do more, and we will do more. Thank you.
Grumpy Freeland needs a little Wexit, yes. Needs a little maintenance, you betcha.
Drugs and disorder. That's what we have after 9 years of this NDP Liberal government. The extremist policies of this Prime Minister have forced parents in British Columbia to protect their kids from used needles at the playground. Open in-your-face drug use in Tim Hortons, on the SkyTrain, even in our hospitals. The Prime Minister's negligence is killing our citizens. When will he admit that his radical decriminalization experiment has failed and end it?
They won't even admit they failed. No, we were right, but we're ending it because we were right. It's just so illogical.
Canadians are dying every day
Try
from
again,
an
woman.
ever-changing illegal toxic drug supply. The opposition leader and members of the Conservative Party are a big talk about investing in treatment. The Conservatives cut 2/3 of the drug treatment fund when they were last in government.
Is that the best you can do,
Mr.
Mr.
Speaker. Safe consumption sites, accessible social
Yeah,
safe consumption.
there's no safe consumption sites. There's nothing safe about them.
They have no plan, Mr. Speaker. On this side of the House, we continue to work.
You don't have a plan? You call this a plan, woman? To admit you're a failure? You call that a plan? These people are just so full of crap. It's coming out of their ears and noses.
14,000. That is the number of Canadians that have died from drug overdoses since 2015. Entirely preventable. Last year, BC set a record. with over 2,500, and they want to
What
talk
kind of a
about
moron do
saving
you have to be
lives
not to
and
understand
compassion.
this is related to their
Premier
policy?
Eby and this Prime Minister have failed British Columbians, and now he's taking his deadly experiment to Toronto. Until this extremist drug policy is dismantled, people will keep dying. Will he prioritize recovery and stop killing
If
Canadians?
you make it
with his
easier for
radical
people to shoot up heroin, more people are going to die. How stupid do you have to be not to get that? But the Liberals don't get it.
Mr. Speaker, the opposition don't want to talk about the plans or the tools that are needed to save lives because they don't have a plan. All they offer Canadians are slogans and fear. Slogans are not an evidence-based strategy,
You
Mr.
bloody
Speaker.
hypocrite.
They are just words. We have a full suite of measures that address this
Full-
crisis.
what is your
Because
full
it's a public health
suite of
crisis,
measures?
Mr. Speaker. It is not a criminal issue. We continue to work with BC on the exemption that they requested with a clear lens of public health and public safety.
Oh, yes, just blame BC for it all. Yeah. There's enough blame to go around. But between you and BC, you're 100%
Mr. Speaker,
blame.
this NDP Liberal Prime Minister is not worth the crime, chaos, drugs, and disorder. After 9 years of the Prime Minister's extremist policies, public drug use has become the norm. The Prime Minister has made it legal in British Columbia to smoke meth on the beach beside a family or smoke crack in a hospital beside healthcare workers. In fact, a nurse in British Columbia stopped breastfeeding her twin girls early at 13 months because being exposed to illicit drugs in the hallway. When will the NDP Liberals realize that time is up and end the decriminalization?
I'm glad they're
today?
going after this today because this is outrageous how the Liberals get away with
The
this
Honourable
crap.
Minister of Mental Health and Addictions.
Mr. Speaker,
You excuse
every
for a
life
cabinet
lost
minister?
in the illegal toxic drug supply,
You're an
every
excuse for a
overdose,
human
every
being.
family that loses a loved one is a tragedy. Mr. Speaker, our focus working with the BC government on their exemption request is about saving lives, about providing
Oh, yeah. How
healthcare.
many lives you saved?
Harm reduction is healthcare, Mr. Speaker.
How many
Treatment is
lives have you
healthcare, Mr.
saved?
Speaker.
You have
Prevention
killed
is healthcare,
people.
Mr. Speaker.
More people
Enforcement is
dying of
also part of the
overdoses
plan.
every day, every
We
hour in
continue to
BC
work
because of your
with law
policy.
enforcement in
How
the
are you
provinces.
saving lives?
They continue
You're a
to
liar.
divide.
You're a blatant liar. You're a worthless excuse for a human being. An even worse
Member
excuse
from,
for
Northern
cabinet
Rockies,
ministers.
to please make sure that he only takes a microphone when he is recognized. The honourable member from Fort McMurray, Cold Lake.
I'm sorry, Mr. Speaker. Drug deaths are up 380% in BC since 2015 when they took office. So the NDP Liberal Coalition unleashed a horrific experiment in British Columbia, and now the NDP Premier is pleading with the Prime Minister to fix this disaster. But what we're learning is the Toronto minister has decided they're going to double down and they want to expand this failed project into Toronto. After 9 years,
yeah.
this NDP Liberal government's drug policy is failing Canadians, and the Prime Minister is not worth the cost. Instead of expanding this, will they do the right thing and just end this policy today?
Yeah, great policy for Toronto with all the addicts wandering around that useless city.
Around the world, opioid deaths are taking so many lives.
Mr. Euthanasia,
The only way
the
we can
euthanasia
rise and
czar.
meet that moment is with truth and evidence, and not inflaming through spreading false information this situation. I would ask the member opposite,
Liar.
instead of trying to seek opportunity to attack
Liar.
in this House, to work collaboratively on evidence-based solutions that save lives, like her, like every member of the House.
You killing
When a life
machine.
is
That's all
lost,
you
it
want to do
rips
is
us
see
all apart.
Canadians
And we have
die
to
of
lead with
euthanasia
truth
or
and
drug
honesty
overdoses.
and set aside partisanship, Mr. Speaker.
Another brutal excuse for a human being.
The honourable member from Caribou, Prince George.
Mr. Speaker, overdose is the leading cause of death in my province of British Columbia.
Yeah, my
This
voice
NDP
is
Liberal
back.
Prime Minister's extremist
I
drug
did not
policies
shut the sound
have
off
turned
earlier.
our
This is
neighborhoods into war
bloody
zones.
well a
Our
YouTube
drugs
thing.
are being used in
Yeah.
playgrounds, coffee shops, and even hospitals.
I am so
Last
sick
week,
of
a
being
drug-addled
suppressed
man lit
by social
fires
media. I will
and
keep
consumed
speaking
drugs
the
in
truth.
front of traumatized kids at the Prince George
How
Aquatic
dare
Center.
Mark Holland talk
The
about
RCMP were called numerous
truth?
times, but their hands are tied because of their insane drug
It makes you
policies.
nauseous
Will the Prime Minister
to listen
end
to
his
these liberals.
deadly drug decriminalization today?
The honourable Minister of Health.
Mr. Speaker, I would
Minister
ask
of Death.
clearly, what evidence?
Tammy,
what evidence
oh, sorry,
are they
Tammy
basing
Robinson.
Their decisions on? And the
You're
answer to
right.
that
He's the
question,
Minister of Death.
Colleagues.
That's a very good point, Karina Mitchell. Yeah. Eradicate all the homeless people and the drug addicts off the street because they got more coming to replace them.
25 seconds left on the clock.
Mr. Speaker,
People used to think that was crazy.
Slogans, replacing research and evidence with talking points will not fix
What is
this
your
problem,
research and
Mr.
evidence,
Speaker.
Mark
There is
Holland?
not a person in this house who is not ripped apart when we watch somebody lose a loved one.
You're not ripped
to
apart.
this
You love it.
crisis. But to meet it with partisanship, to meet it with pretend solutions, to do things that have failed in other jurisdictions,
You are a
disgrace to
complete
those who've
failure
lost
as a
family
human
members,
being
Mr.
and as a
Speaker.
cabinet minister and as an MP. And you dare to stand up and pretend you care? You don't care about anything except your own political power. These people are clowns, but they're also criminals.
Speaker, this NDP Liberal Prime Minister is not worth the crime, chaos, drugs, and disorder. After 9 years, this Prime Minister's extremist
keeps
policy
adding up, doesn't
allowing
it?
for deadly hard drugs to be used in public spaces such as parks, coffee shops, beaches, and hospitals. A leaked memo in BC is now instructing nurses to teach patients how to inject illegal drugs into their intravenous.
Jeez.
Will the Prime Minister end his deadly drug decriminalization experiment today?
The Honourable Minister of Mental Addictions and Health.
Speaker, on this side of the House, we are committed to saving lives and making sure people who use drugs don't die alone. We moved forward with a decriminalization pilot project at BC's request and have always maintained it would be rigorously monitored and adjusted as needed. We know a full suite of tools, including harm reduction, are needed. Even the MP from Caribou Prince George knows it. He said himself, quote, I asked if safe injection sites were helping. They did say that safe injection sites probably do help. Mr. Speaker, every tool, every resource to save lives is what we are committed to.
The Honourable Member for Lac-Saint-Jean. This morning, La Presse reported on 5 families of Indian origin crammed into one apartment because of the housing crisis. It's outrageous to see such a thing in Canada, but sadly, this is the reality for thousands of asylum seekers. They arrive here and they realize that they don't even have the right to work to support themselves because the federal government takes 2 years to give them work permits. Then they realize that it now takes Ottawa 38 months to process asylum applications. They want an answer, even if it's a no, as soon as possible. Mr. Speaker, could there please be a bit more humanity and fewer bureaucratic delays? The Honourable Minister of Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship. Well, over the past few months, we have decreased processing times. We can continue to do even better.
Yeah, the block is back.
I understand from the member that he wants to proceed to regularization, so I expect them to support our legislation to regularize those living in Canada. The Honourable Member for Lac-Saint-Jean. Well, I'd like to quote what Quebec's
Occasionally, I turn
immigration
the
minister
sound off
said
if I
this
wanna say
morning. Quebec is still taking in too many asylum seekers. The federal government needs to distribute them across Canada. Mr. Speaker, on the one hand, Quebec's intake capacity has been exceeded.
I can't believe that many
and on the
people
other
wanted
hand,
to
the
hear the
Federal
block.
Immigration Department is racking up delays in
The block
processing
has
applications.
nothing to say.
And what's the result of that?
Except, where's my money?
Families are plunged into poverty because of the federal government's incompetence when it comes to immigration.
I'm here. I'm getting a
These are
pension
people,
from
human
you
beings,
people
not
and the rest of
numbers.
Canada
Will the minister
because
do
I'm a
his job?
separatist. That's what Canada has
The
become.
Honourable Minister of Immigration,
That's how illogical,
Refugees and
how
Citizenship.
stupid, how irreverent Canada
That
has
is
become.
beyond absurd,
We've got a bunch
Mr.
of
Speaker. But it's
fat-ass
so
MPs
typical
sitting in the House
of
of Commons
Bloc
who want to separate from the rest of the country.
to make
And
these
they're
ridiculous
getting
accusations.
not only a salary,
Typical
but
Bloc
a
Québécois.
Government of Canada pension for doing so. That is how absurd Canada has become. And I've been saying that for years. Okay, I'll shut up for a while.
Overwhelmed. 83% of Canadians are paying $80 more a month for food than they were just 6 months ago. According to Second Harvest, more than half of the food banks in the Toronto area can't meet demand, and they're putting families on wait lists. Families can't afford to put food on the table, and the crisis is getting worse when the Liberal NDP government increases the carbon tax 23%. Will the Prime Minister reverse his decision to increase the carbon tax past 234 in its original form so Canadians don't have to dumpster dive for their dinner?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
As the member well knows, Bill C-234 is in the hands of the Conservative House Leader. The member should speak to him.
The Honourable Member for Foothills.
This NDP Liberal government isn't worth the cost of food. While Canadians are skipping meal, the ministers who are in charge of lowering food
Thumbs
costs
up for John
Canadians
Barlow. Good
is
guy.
rubbing shoulders with Hollywood celebrities and political elites at the most expensive dinner imaginable. He's dining out at the White House on the taxpayer dime. After 9 years of this Prime Minister, he's out to lunch and the ministers are out of touch. Will the Champagne Coalition and Caviar Caucus lower food costs for Canadians and pass 234 in its original form?
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister, Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, 2 weeks ago, we presented our budget to deliver fairness for every generation. Because right now, a nurse or a carpenter can pay taxes at a higher marginal rate than a multimillionaire. That's not fair, and we're changing it. But, Mr. Speaker, the Conservatives have
Doesn't
said
this
that
woman
they're
just make your blood
opposed
boil?
to our budget. And that is because the only thing they know how to do is cut, austerity, and quietly to keep on delivering tax breaks to their rich friends.
Did she think she was going to soccer practice today or something? I mean, look at the way she's dressed.
Food banks in Canada are being pushed to the brink with high demand and donations not keeping pace. Speaker, after 9 years of this NDP Liberal government, that was this morning's headline. Canadian families cannot afford to buy food, and our farmers who grow food face punishment, not progress. No farms means no food. From high cost to empty store shelves, this Prime Minister and his costly carbon tax are not worth the cost. So will the Prime Minister finally axe the carbon tax so our farm families can stay in business and Canadian families aren't forced to use food banks?
Good question. The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister, Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, our
Mr.
government
Speaker.
believes in fairness for every generation.
You don't believe in fairness for
especially younger
anybody,
Canadians.
except you
That's
believe
why
in
we're investing
unfairness
in
for
building
youth.
more homes faster. We're investing in making life more affordable with programs like early learning and child care and dental care. And we're investing in jobs and growth. And we're paying for it by asking those at the top to contribute a little bit more. But the Conservatives are opposed to our plan. The only thing they believe in is austerity and quietly giving tax breaks to their rich friends.
The Honourable Member from London Fanshawe.
Last week, the Maple revealed the Canadian government is hosting test sessions with an Israeli company, Smart Shooter, whose technology is used to kill Palestinian children. They're even eligible for a prize. Its CEO boasted that this war is good for business. As Palestinians continue to be killed, Canada's support of this company is inhumane and shows a shocking lack of judgment. Why is this government showcasing weapons in Canada that are killing kids?
The Honourable Minister for National Defence.
Mr. Speaker, and I would simply remind the member opposite that Canada has one of the most rigorous military export regimes in the world, and we are vigilant in ensuring that all military technology being shared with any other foreign country is rigorously meets the standards that have been set for us.
The honourable member from Edmonton, Strathcona.
A rigorous regime. Israeli arms are being tested in Canada, in Alberta. Canadians do not want to be complicit in Netanyahu's crimes against Palestinian children. Canada should not be buying from these companies and should not be selling to the Israeli government. The minister promised this House to issue a notice to exporters on March 18th, 6 weeks ago. Where is the notice to exporters, and when will Canada finally impose a two-way arms embargo?
Hear, hear. The Honourable Minister for Foreign Affairs.
Mr. Speaker, our position when it comes to arms export permits is well known, absolutely clear. Now, when it comes to what is happening in the Middle East, we've been clear. The violence must stop. We need a ceasefire now. Hostages must be released, and we need to make sure that humanitarian aid gets into Gaza. And at the end of the day, what we need is a two-state solution where the state of Israel can live side by side in peace and security with a Palestinian state. I've been in contact with my US, UK, and many Arab countries counterpart over the weekend, working hard on bringing back peace to the Middle East. Thank you.
Oh, Melanie. She's wondering where Justin is. No, no doubt.
Our government has shown great success in attracting historical
Yeah, I
investment in
gotta
our auto
change
industry.
these.
Can the minister highlight the recent investment
more often
from
here.
Honda and what it means for building our EV supply chain and growing Canadian jobs?
Good question. The Honourable for Innovation.
That's
Mr.
pitiful.
Speaker,
Just pitiful.
thank you very much to my colleague for
Oh,
leadership
we
and
haven't
good
heard from this
question.
idiot for a while.
Mr. Speaker, last week we witnessed a $15.7 billion investment by Honda, Mr. Speaker. This is the largest investment
Yeah,
in Honda's history.
for cars nobody's going to buy, Mr. Speaker.
Sector, Mr. Speaker, and it's one of the largest investment by a
You got to be the
company in this
biggest
country,
bozo
Mr.
on the
Speaker.
front bench, and
This
that's
is
hard to
great
beat.
news for our workers across the nation. This is great
That's
news
a
for
real
our auto
challenge,
sector,
to
Mr.
use
Speaker.
Justin Trudeau's
This is
words.
great news for Canada,
It's
Mr.
a real
Speaker.
challenge to be
Let's
the biggest
celebrate this,
bozo on
Canada,
the front
because
bench,
a
but you're
hub
doing
for
it.
manufacturing in the 21st century.
How stupid do they come? Can this guy even answer a question in a normal tone of
The
voice?
honourable member
He's
for
always got to
Charlevoix,
look like he's
Haute
cheering on a
Saint-Charles.
football team.
Mr. Speaker,
God,
the
he's an
Journal de
incredibly
Montréal
stupid man.
reported this morning that 25% of Quebecers can't
So
even
many of
afford
them.
a decent standard of living. Even working 50 hours a week isn't enough to avoid living in poverty. That's where we are after 9 years of this government. The statistics are clear, and the Bloc, which claims to promote Quebec's interests, has voted with the Liberals for every budget allocation to support this exorbitant inflationary spending. Does the government and the Bloc have enough courage to admit that they have let Quebecers down?
But
and
anybody
stop
would
their
stand
uncontrolled spending?
up in the front bench and laud that government
The
subsidy
Honourable
to the
Leader of the
electric
government,
vehicle plant analysis.
Mr. Speaker,
1,000
leader
jobs?
of the opposition
BS.
once again encouraged white supremacists, anarchists,
White
and
supremacists. Your leader is the white
that happens
supremacist.
very regularly, and that draws the admiration of those who
What a
claim that
desperate
school
plea
shootings
for
didn't
help.
happen. And
These
now the
people
leader
are
of the
so
opposition
hopeless.
has 30 seconds to speak to this House
Oh,
and
we
to
have 30
Canadians.
seconds to speak to this House.
Once I've sat down, I ask him to disavow the opinions of these dangerous people. Will he do it?
What dangerous
Honourable
people is he
member for
talking about?
Charlevoix,
The dangerous people in this
Haute-Saint-Charles.
country are called
Oh, Mr.
liberals.
Speaker, during that
Those are the
time,
dangerous people.
what about the
And he has
$54
disavowed
billion
those.
that Canadians and Quebecers have to pay in interest to banks in London and New York because of this government's uncontrolled spending, supported by the Bloc Québécois? Think about it, Mr. Speaker. The Bloc has voted for every budget allocation, and so today we have interest that has to be paid. That is the equivalent to federal health transfers to all of the provinces. We could do much more with that money. Will the government end its uncontrolled spending, and will the Bloc stop supporting them? The Honourable Government House Leader. Mr. Speaker, the leader of the Conservatives showed us his true colors last week, and by refusing to disavow these points of view, he's doing it again. I wonder how the Conservative Quebec caucus can support this Mr. Speaker, the Leader of the Opposition speaks without conviction and clarity on a matter that should be very, very simple. Mr. Speaker, his silence speaks volumes. This is not leadership. The Honourable Member for Chicoutimi-de-Fior. Mr. Speaker, after 9 years of this government, too many Canadians and Quebecers are living in poverty. The Journal de Montréal says that 25% of Quebecers don't have a livable income. Imagine working 50 hours a week and not having enough money to meet your needs. Despite all of that, the Bloc continues to support the Liberals by voting for budget allocations. My God, it's expensive to vote for the Bloc. Mr. Speaker, when will the government finally listen to us and stop its uncontrolled spending? The Honourable...
I just want to make one comment about the craziness from the House Leader today, from the government House Leader, about Pierre Poilievre needing to disavow Alex Jones's supposed endorsement and his connection with Diagolon. This is so incredibly stupid because Diagolon is one person. Diagolon is not some militia on the prairie. Diagolon is not some sort of anti-government group. Diagolon exists only in cyberspace. And in fact, the leader of Diagolon, a leader of one, insulted Pierre Poilievre and said some very horrible things about his wife. So why would Pierre Poilievre be aligned in any way to a meme on the internet? This is how stupid the Liberals are. They really believe this is a real organization. They're so incredibly dense. Anyway, I had to get that out because it's important. We know this.
$1 billion in spending. When will the Liberals supported by the Bloc stop their uncontrolled spending? The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance. Mr. Speaker, last time the Conservative leader was in power, he tried to increase the age of retirement to 67. It's the Liberal government that reversed that decision.
Are you trying out for a play today? Is that what you're doing,
Christia? Of the middle class.
Let me guess. You're the mother and all my sons.
For the richest 1%. They voted against our plan.
It's just incredible.
Today, we are investing in Canadians. Thanks to tax on the wealthiest. And
this must be the latest thing. If you want to replace the Prime Minister, you don't try to look 20 years younger. You try to look 20 years older.
The expansion of the Port of Valleyfield is being torpedoed by the federal government. The Border Services Agency, claiming a lack of resources, is withdrawing the operator's right to handle containers at this port of vital importance to the regional economy. The mayor of Salaberry de Valleyfield and the director of economic development.
I don't dare turn the sound off for the Bloc. Somebody will say, "Hey, stop that."
Will the Minister of Public Safety intervene to ask the agency to continue doing its job instead of undermining the future of the Port of Valleyfield? The Honourable Minister of Public Safety. Mr. Speaker,
that's the best line I've heard all day.
We share the concern of our colleague.
Probably wants to replace Justin
in the Liberal caucus.
Hey, Dominic,
regarding the campaign going? Valleyfield, I intend to raise these important issues with the Border Services Agency because we understand the importance for the regional economy and the people of the region. The Honourable Member for Salaberry-sur-Roi. In 2019, the federal government, through the Building Canada Fund, announced over $12 million in funding to the Port of Valleyfield for a wharf expansion. Yet today, the Border Services Agency is pulling out of the Port of Valleyfield. On the one hand, the federal government is funding the port's expansion. On the other, it is sabotaging its development. What is the logic behind this nonsensical and damaging decision? Mr. Speaker, will the minister help me get
What's the logic for electing an idiot like you to the House of Commons? I'd like to know that.
Agency to review its decision.
You're nothing but a waste of space, along with every other PQ MP.
Mr. Speaker,
you're fighting for your own little cause.
In owner,
so go back to Quebec and fight.
Don't automatically continue. There have to be requests that are presented again. Nothing is automatic. But that being said, we understand the importance of the Port of Valleyfield. My colleague here referenced that, and we will work on that.
Also,
The honourable
Yeah.
member for Louis Saint Laurent.
Multiple hair bands
Mr.
on her
Speaker,
wrist. You're
never in
right.
the glorious history
I
of our
noticed
country
that
have
too,
we
Nina.
had
This
a
woman
government
has
that has spent
just
so
no
much,
shame.
$500 billion in budgetary allocations. The Liberal Party voted in favour. And who else? The Bloc Québécois. If the government can spend without counting the cost, it's thanks to the Bloc Québécois. This is a big centralizing government thanks to the Bloc Québécois. Which minister will stand up to defend the Bloc's position? The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance. Mr. Speaker, our government understands the importance of making investments in Canadians, in Quebecers.
Well, it's too bad you can't make an investment in your
We are
wardrobe
doing
someday.
so. And we are doing it responsibly, in a fiscally responsible manner. We have a AAA credit rating, and the governor
It
of
shows
the
you the
Bank of
contempt
Canada
she has
said
for Parliament and for
that
Canadians,
we
that
are
she would show up
respecting
looking like this
the
today,
fiscal guardrails.
representing the Prime Minister who's out farting around again.
Also commits to respecting those. That is what we are doing. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
She hasn't even got her usual
South Shore,
hand in the air, domineering, I can't stand you people
Taxpayer money to
effect.
subsidize international auto companies. Then the Building and Trades Union recently condemned the use of foreign replacement workers at the Stellantis plants. Jobs like forklift driver. Yet contrary to the Liberal claims, foreign replacement workers keep being brought in for jobs that don't require specialty knowledge. The union calls that a slap in the face, and we agree. After 9 years, the Prime Minister is not worth the cost. So how much will Canadian taxpayers pay to employ foreign replacement workers?
The Honourable Minister for Innovation.
Mr. Speaker, instead of spreading disinformation, Mr. Speaker, this member should be
instead of-
standing with all Canadians in this House and making sure that we maximize jobs for Canadians. That's exactly what we're doing, Mr. Speaker. The investment that he's talking about is going to create more than 2,500 direct jobs at this plant, Mr. Speaker.
What a
It's going to be one
load
of
of
the
crap.
largest
The only
battery
good jobs in
assembly
Canada are in the
plants in
House of
North America,
Commons
Mr.
for
Speaker.
idiots
We should
like
all
you
be proud
who
that
couldn't
Canada
sell
now
cars.
ranks first in the world for the battery ecosystem we've built, Mr. Speaker. This is according to Bloomberg.
You're a pathetic
We're going to
joke.
keep investing in Canadians. We're going to keep investing in jobs, and we're going to keep investing in the auto industry.
We're going to keep investing in ourselves. Yeah.
The Honourable Member from
Damn, we're going to keep investing in liberals.
This Liberal minister is spreading disinformation because in committee admitted he hadn't read the contracts.
He doesn't. He can't even read the funny pages.
And do you know what's not in them? Any requirement that jobs at these plants be Canadians only. Canadians don't believe this Prime Minister, and since I've read the contracts, I don't either. The NDP Liberals are hiding the truth. If this Prime Minister has contractual job guarantees, he will have no problem proving me wrong.
That's right.
Will the Liberals release the contracts, yes or no?
But he's going to give you a big song and dance and sing Mammy. No, sorry. That was Trudeau's act.
And maximizing job. If you read the contract, I guess you should have a lawyer to understand the terms, Mr. Speaker, because it's very simple. The terms are maximizing Canadian jobs, but it gives me an opportunity, Mr. Speaker. We should
The
rejoice.
grandstand again,
Just
Mr.
last
Speaker.
week we announced and we supported the largest investment in the auto sector in Canada's history. Honda is going to be investing $15.7 billion.
Selling
Mr.
cars
Speaker,
that
in this
nobody will
country.
buy. You
Mr.
half-wit.
Speaker, we're attracting record
How
investment.
stupid
we're
are
going to
you?
create jobs, and we're going to fight for every Canadian jobs.
You're so goddamn stupid. Nobody's going to buy your
The
cars.
Honourable Member for Kingston and the Islands.
Mr. Speaker, this government's policies have been focused on promoting diversity,
Oh, here's a
respect,
nice
and
softball
equality
question
amongst all Canadians.
from this
On that side of the House,
creep,
however,
Mark
we learned
Harrison.
last week that the
Real
leader
creep.
of the opposition visited an encampment set up by individuals linked to extreme far-right groups like Diagolon. CSIS says Diagolon encourages and inspires serious violence, yet the Conservative leader is refusing to denounce them or apologize for engaging with them. Can the government please reiterate how we will keep Canadians safe from extreme groups and what our responsibilities are as political leaders?
What a pathetic question.
The Honourable Minister for Employment and Workforce Development.
Mr. Speaker, while we can appreciate different views and political opinions, what we cannot and should not tolerate is any member of this House indulging in and actively courting extremist far-right groups that espouse anti-Semitic, anti-2S LGBTQI+, and white nationalist ideologies. The Conservative leaders' embrace of, and quite frankly, Mr. Speaker, refusal to denounce Diagolon in this very...
It doesn't exist, you bald-headed idiot. There is no Diagolon. My God, this is worth a story.
Colleagues, I'm having great difficulty trying to hear the answer from the Honourable Minister. I'm going to ask members to please let the Minister finish his statement. The Minister has 20 seconds left on the clock.
Mr. Speaker, the Conservative leaders' embrace of and refusal to denounce Diagolon is incredibly alarming. That he will do anything to win speaks volumes to his values. And Mr. Speaker, quite frankly,
what are your
sending
values
chills across this country. On this side, we will always defend Canadians. And
No,
Canadian
having
values.
kids have sex changes. That's what you'll defend. You horrible excuse for a minister. I can't believe the Liberals are taking this Diagolon seriously. They're actually introducing it as questions. How stupid are they?
After 9 years of this NDP Liberal government, young Canadians know that this Prime Minister is not worth the cost. 8 in 10 people now regard home ownership as being only for the rich, as they've completely given up on their dream of ever owning
I'm not sure
a home.
any of
So
it's worth the
simply,
cost.
Mr. Speaker, will this government finally listen to Canadians and to our common sense plan to cap spending that brings down inflation and interest rates so that young people can finally afford a home?
The Honourable Minister for Housing, Infrastructure and Communities.
Mr. Speaker, I'll agree insofar as the Conservatives believe that it's essential that we do more to make sure that young people can get into the housing market. But the difference between our side and theirs is they do not have a plan to achieve that reality. Mr. Speaker, the measures that they are putting forward include measures that would raise taxes on home buildings, make it more difficult to build homes in communities, and actually cut funding for homes, for programs that are supporting home building today. We have new measures that create tax-free opportunities for young people to save up for a down payment, new measures that help young people establish a credit score, and new measures that reduce their monthly mortgage costs. We will do what it takes to solve the housing crisis. I wish they'd join us.
The Honourable Member from Fundy Royal.
Mr. Speaker, after 9 years of this Prime Minister, car theft in Canada is completely out of control. 2 in 5 Canadians have either had their car stolen or know someone who has. Last week in Victoria, a repeat offender was arrested 3 times in 3 days for stealing cars. The police in Victoria had to put out a statement, and they laid the blame for this on the Liberals' failed Bill C-75. Will this Justice Minister listen to the police and reverse their soft-on-crime Bill C-75?
The Honourable Minister of Justice and Attorney General.
Mr. Speaker, I've got a lot of respect for that member. He's my critic. He served on the Justice
How
Committee
much
with
more
me for
hair
a
has he
number of
lost?
years. What I don't have respect for is the instructions
How
he
much
gets
more
from
hair
his
has
leader on
Arif
how to
Virani
vote.
lost
When we have
since he
legislation
introduced
in the
the
chamber
online
that
harms
deals
bill?
with, in the fall economic statement, tackling the money laundering and the organized crime links to auto theft, he's instructed to vote against. Before even reading the document
This man
that
is a
the
criminal.
budget 2024 and what it contains with respect to addressing auto theft, increasing maximum penalties, dealing with
Let's
the
have a
link
look at the
between
back of your
using
head.
youth and
How
organized
much hair have you
criminality and
lost?
tackling more money laundering, he was told to vote against yet again by his leader.
It's getting, look at that. It's larger every week. The old Samoan prophecy, the proverb. He who takes free speech away will lose his hair. He's losing his hair every day.
The problem, Conservatives have a private member's bill in the House right now that establishes serious jail time for repeat car thefts. Mr. Speaker, this individual in Victoria was arrested 3 times in 3 days. He pushed a woman out of her car to steal her vehicle. He drove off and caused a collision. It's time in Canada that we crack down on repeat violent auto theft. Conservatives will do it.
The Honourable Minister of Justice and Attorney General.
Mr. Speaker, that member knows that repeat violent offenders are already dealt with by our bail regime.
He's probably lost hair since we last talked.
You should also know that when
We're gonna hit
C-75,
600 here.
the very bill.
No, YouTube won't let me do that. No.
I'm going to ask members, please, to allow the minister to.
Thank
to
you,
listen to his
everybody, by the
question.
way,
Ask you
for
to settle
boosting the
down.
numbers
The
today
honourable minister
and
from
getting
Utah.
through that glitch, that
Thank you very much,
sound
Mr.
glitch
Speaker.
earlier. It was
That
not
member
my
knows
fault.
and should know that on the bail reform
But
bill that
thanks
he
for your
actually
patience
voted
and thanks
in
for your
favor
perseverance.
of, it tackles serious violent repeat offenders, which would include those who use serious violence in committing an auto theft. What he should also realize is that the very bill he impugns, Bill C-75, when that was before this chamber in the 42nd Parliament, we promoted an augmentation, an increasing in the penalty that is available for auto theft. He and all of his colleagues voted against. What I would prefer is some collaboration and a bit less hypocrisy.
I swear he's losing more hair every day.
The honourable
You see
member
it.
from
I'm not
Halifax
making this
West.
up.
Mr. Speaker, our government is making historic efforts to solve
Historic
Canada's
efforts.
housing crisis.
Just take
Not
your free
only do we
speech
need
away,
to build
yes.
more homes, we need to build them faster, and Canada must change
What
the
the
way
hell
we
is
build
this?
those homes. Can the Minister of Housing, Infrastructure and
Oh, no.
Communities tell this housing Canadians the new measures introduced to solve Canada's housing crisis?
The honourable minister for Housing, Infrastructure and Communities.
Thank the honourable member for her question and for her advocacy for housing supports, particularly for the most vulnerable across the city of Halifax. Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to share that we have put forward a plan to solve Canada's national housing crisis.
Of course you
It
have,
includes
yes.
new measures that will help make it easier to build more homes by reducing the cost, eliminating the barriers, including freeing up more public land. It includes more measures to help young people save up for a down payment and to reduce their mortgage costs. And it also includes measures to support those who cannot afford to have a roof over their head, including a recent investment of $11 million to build more housing for persons with disabilities and seniors. We're going to continue to
What a
make the
joke.
investments to solve Canada's housing crisis.
Thanks for the softball question.
The honourable member from Courtenay, Alberni.
Mr. Speaker, last week the BC police chiefs told us it is deadly street drugs laced with fentanyl that is killing thousands, not the diversion of safer supply. They clearly advise that preventing people from using drugs in public and preventing toxic drug deaths requires more, not fewer safe consumption sites. BC has listened to the police call for more tools to deal with the public use of illicit substances. When will the Liberals ignore conservative disinformation, recall the expert task force, and formulate a comprehensive plan to end the toxic drug crisis?
Stop
When?
pretending you're a critic. Just go
The
to
honourable
dinner
minister of
and
Mental
feed
Health
yourself.
and Addictions.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Oh,
Mr.
this-
Speaker, I want to thank the
this
member for
farcical
being a
woman's up
collaborative
again.
partner in addressing the toxic drug supply.
Thank you
and the
very much for
tragic
being our
overdose
colleague.
deaths that are taking over this country from day to day. We're committed to a comprehensive, collaborative, and evidence-based
What a
substance
joke.
policy approach. We appreciate the excellent work of the expert task force on substance use, whose mandate was to provide advice to the government on a renewed Canadian drugs and substance plan. It's important that the actions be informed by independent advice of experts and evidence. I've asked the department to reestablish an expert advisory committee, and work is underway.
Oh, what an excuse you are.
The honourable member from Spadina, Fort York.
Mr. Speaker, Canadians want to know how a deportation order, one upheld by a federal court, of a person convicted of 5 criminal charges and who didn't like to attend much school despite being in Canada on a student visa, somehow still managed to get ministerial intervention to stop his removal. Did the Minister of Immigration intend to make a mockery of our legal and immigration systems? Or was this intervention guided by the hope of getting a few more votes for his party in BC?
Probably the latter.
The honourable minister for Immigration, Refugees and
As the
Citizenship.
member well knows, these are not matters that we talk about publicly, much less on the floor of the House of Commons. Thank you.
Let's all pray for a day when these Liberal cabinet ministers are extinct.
Colleagues, following discussions among representatives of all parties in the House, I understand there is an agreement to observe a moment of silence in memory of Jean-Pierre Ferland. À la suite des
Anyway, thank you for watching today. It amazes me how the House Leader of the Liberal Party and the government keeps bringing up a mythical, non-existent organization called Diagolon. It doesn't exist, folks. I think you all who are watching today know that. And you know what the so-called leader of Diagolon threatened to do with Pierre Poilievre. I'm not going to go into that any farther because it's nonsense and it's crap. But Pierre Poilievre is not associated with Diagolon at all. And If he wants to press this with the Liberal government, he can. He can. Because this is absolute nonsense. And to suggest that Poilievre or the Conservatives are aligned with white supremacists when the Liberals have the leader who did blackface comedy for public and private events for, as Poilievre says, half of his adult life. It's ludicrous. Now, what is going on here? This is a desperate attempt to distract. This is what the Liberals always do. Distract. Put your attention over here. Sleight of hand, like a magician does. While you're not looking here, I'm going to do something over here. And that's what the Liberals do very well. The Liberals are liars. That's why we used to always say liberals, because they lie chronically and consistently. They can't do anything but lie because they just think they have a right to stay in power. And what they're doing right now with Poilievre having to renounce Alex Jones. When did Justin Trudeau actually apologize for doing blackface? No. He blamed growing up in Montreal for his doing blackface. And he couldn't even remember how many times he did it. And now the Liberals want Pierre Poilievre to apologize for being associated with a group he has nothing to do with and that doesn't even exist beyond a meme. We are going to fight this tooth and nail because I tell you, I am sick of the lies coming from this Liberal government. I am sick of the crap coming from this Liberal government. I am sick of people standing up and making dumb statements that make no sense. And Canadians being expected to believe them. They really think we're that stupid. They really think we can't think for ourselves. They've already said we can't speak for ourselves. Now they say we can't think for ourselves. Thanks for watching today, folks. This was a hell of a good time. And we'll be back tomorrow. And I'm going to fix this sound problem. Believe me, because this is not going to happen again. Thank you.